Now going to move us on to our second presentation of the morning, our second prize-winning initiative. This is, and Darren's going to tell us about the insights gained when, I think we could reasonably say, Darren, the balloon went up and ministers said, what the hell is going on with traffic? And the answer came back, we're not really sure. So what did the TTF do to help? Darren.
Thank you, Steve. So I need to apologise, you have to listen to me again. This is the last time this morning you'll be pleased to hear. Can I have the next slide, please? Right, thank you. So what I want to do now is have a quick gallop through the data we've been collecting as part of the Covid-19 Local Authority Transport Data Project. Some of you, hopefully most of you, will be aware of this. A lot of you on the call today probably contributed to this, which I'll thank you for at the end. But I'll just give a bit of background. So as Steve said, this came about when the balloon well and truly went up in March, and we went from do you remember the olden days when we used to go out to pubs and go on aeroplanes and things? We went from that world to the world of lockdown in probably about 8 weeks end to end. So this was a seismic change in the way government did everything and the way government thought about everything. And it did very much show up a very serious lack of data in DFT. Now, DFT knows quite a lot about the railways. It knows quite a lot about air travel and a fair bit about what's happening in the ports. It knows a reasonable amount about what happens on the motorways, because we have links with Highways England, and we obviously they are fundamentally an agency of ours, so we know quite a lot about the strategic road network. What it proved is we knew very little about urban networks, about local authority highway networks. And of course, as I've said at events before, something like 97% of England's road networks are under the ownership of 152 local highway authorities. So understanding what's happening on that 97% of the network is fairly crucial if you want to understand what's going on. But you need to speak to 152 people to find out. So it's not an easy thing to do. But quite quickly, in preparing for lockdown and moving into lockdown, it became clear that urban travel was going to be quite an important temperature gauge on the dashboard of the COVID response. It was going to be quite a good way of working out what's happening out there, what the restrictions are doing, how people are responding, how variations in the restrictions are affecting behaviour. Understanding how people are travelling around our cities and between our cities would be a very good way of understanding what was going on out there. So we thought about this, and we thought about the Transport Technology Forum and the fact that gives us links into lots of authorities. It gives us a good understanding of data. The projects that we briefly mentioned in the last session, the local pilot projects that we've done, give us a good understanding of what people are up to, how data worked, how local authorities worked. I myself have about 30 years experience in local authorities before coming to DFT. So we felt we could do something, and we had a kind of we had a moment a bit like must have happened early in the Second World War when sewing machine factories started building Spitfires. You know, we thought, well, we have an awful lot of technology, we have an awful lot of understanding and capability here that we could quite easily repurpose for the challenge in hand. So about the 23rd of March, I think it was, I wrote a fairly Churchillian sounding email asking people to step up and be part of the effort and give us their data and allow us to build a national data set, something we've never had before, a national data set built of consuming as many local authority data sources as we could and collating them into a common resource. And we've done that, and we went from nothing to a very comprehensive data set in about 2 or 3 months. And that was the DFT funding that through TTF. It was an awful lot of effort by Arup, who put resources into this almost overnight to start to build the collation, start to build the analysis, start to turn all these disparate data sets into something common, something standard that we could report on. And recently, this work has won the ITS UK Project of the Year award, which we're very pleased about. We won that. We also came second in a category in the Building Industry Awards. We came second in the COVID project category in the National Building and Construction Industry Awards. We came second to the effort to build the Nightingale Hospital. So I don't think that was a bad thing to come second to, really. I take a lot of pleasure from that. Right. So in the next few slides, what I'm going to do is quickly run through some of the types of data that we've collected. And what you'll see from the slides is that I've produced a lot of graphs, but I've produced them quite small. And the reason for doing that is because I don't really want to go through them in detail and pick out exactly what we found. What I want to do is give you a flavour of the types of things we were able to do and the types of things we're still able to do, because this hasn't ended. This is continuing while we're in the current crisis, and hopefully, as we heard on the news today, that may not be too much longer now, but it will continue after that, because this is a really useful way of understanding transport in the UK that DFT's never had access to before. So we start with a general graph. This is a graph of all the data we've collected on transport from around 50 different local authorities throughout the year, and as you can see, this is an extremely good indicator of when stuff happened. You can pick out the events. We've listed many of the events on there, bank holidays, when changes in the COVID restrictions put in place, and the graph shows them. The graph indicates that. So immediately from that initial graph, you can see that we're really onto something here. We really can see, you know, this premise that this is a kind of a temperature gauge for what's happening out there in the country. Understanding local transport is true. We can see that. We can see that really does have an effect. So can the next slide, please. So moving on from that, we can see that we can now start to drill down, and we're able to see some fairly interesting things about very particular periods of time. And I put this slide up because this showed something that we all suspected would happen, but we never really understood. This is to do with traffic throughout the day across towns in England. And as you can see, quite predictably, the traffic for April is very much lower than the rest. And you can see traffic. You can see the average traffic. You can see how traffic has performed in different weeks. You can see the height of the lockdown there when traffic is at its minimum. But what you can also see is how the morning and evening peaks have changed. And again, this is as important as understanding the daily flows. This is important for transport planners. It's important for cities. It's important for people who build transport networks, who in cities, we generally plan for managing traffic in the peak periods. Well, what we're able to show is the peak periods aren't really like they used to be. We have live data that proves that. I think many of us suspected that. This project has given us data to show that really is reality. That I think is incredibly powerful. Next slide, please. We've also been able to look at traffic through different classes. Now, a lot of the data we collect from local authorities is classified. Lots of authorities collect classified data and don't do a great deal with it. Sadly, many do, but many don't. There's a huge amount of data. There's a national resource there that allows us to really understand how different classes of traffic have been affected by lockdown. Now, of course, this is important. It's important to understand around economic activity, where people are travelling by private car. It's important to understand in terms of the way the nation operates, what's happening with heavy goods vehicles, what's happening with bus use, what's happening with different types of traffic, because this is important in terms of understanding what's going on out there. So there we can see a graph again from March until November showing what's happening with different vehicle classes, and there are some interesting things we can pick out there around bus use, around bus mileage, around heavy vehicle use. Again, I'm not going to go into the detail of that, but as you can see, that's a really useful resource to understand what's going on out there. Next slide, please. Because of the nature of the data we get, which has come from a number of cities, we are able to then dive into particular areas and understand analysis by authority area. Now, you could say, well, you could have done this anyway. We could have approached authorities and we could have said, give us your data, and we could have done that on an ad hoc basis, and we did, and that was done quite often for particular schemes. But having the data all in one place allows us to react very quickly to that. So it allows us very quickly to draw out certain authorities. Now, this graph this picture shows 6 authorities. More recently, we've been doing some work around targeting how traffic has been changing in the areas that went into tier 3 before the second national lockdown. Again, we were able to very quickly provide data about how the initial movement to the tiering system was affecting traffic by targeting particular authorities and then overlaying their data to see as a comparator what was going on. So next slide, please. So there we can see across different authorities, we can see the effect of the restrictions overlaid with bank holidays and with other events. So we're able to see there how different areas reacted. There are some things in there that you would dig into more deeply. Hampshire, for example, seems to show very large bank holiday changes in traffic. Why? Well, there are reasons, but at least we can see that. We can start to work that out now. Traffic in Birmingham seems to have had a slightly different return to normal than other traffic. Why? Again, we can think about that. But being able to overlay this data gives us a completely new way of looking at data, a completely new lens to look to work out, as I said earlier, what's really going on out there. Next slide, please. And again, we can look at that in real detail. So here we have the graph I showed before showing the traffic throughout the day nationally. We can do it for different cities and different areas, and we can again see, as you can see there, between Birmingham and Suffolk, there's a huge difference in the way that through the day traffic has reacted to the COVID restrictions. That allows us to think about the policies we're implementing. That allows us to think about how we could support the local authorities in terms of the work that they do and the way they manage their networks. It allows us to speak to ministers and speak to Number 10 and others in government and say this is the picture we're seeing in cities across the country. It's a hugely valuable data set. Next, please. But it's not only for car travel and for motorised vehicles. We've also been able to pick out some really interesting data from active modes such as cycling. And for this, we've used data from companies such as Vivacity, who have a lot of cycling data, from counters, from bodies such as the Canals and Rivers Trust, who have data for canal towpath use. This has been really useful in showing us how cycling responded to COVID, and we know it did. You know, we all know anecdotally that lots more people bought bikes and went out cycling through lockdown. Here we can see the evidence. We can see what really happened there. We can see how spiky cycling actually was, and we can see how dependent cycling or how related cycling is to weather. And again, so thinking about the hypothesis of, well, will cycling really make a big difference in the long term in terms of commuting? It may, but it is very weather dependent. But we can certainly see that the COVID restrictions did lead to huge rises in cycling. Next slide, please. So again, once we have that data, we can blend it with other data sets. So this is cycling compared to rainfall. And guess what? The two seem to correlate. The two seem to have an opposite correlation to each other. It rains a lot, people cycle less. Not particularly useful, maybe that's something we knew already, but it's great to be able to show that. It's great to be able to show that the data we're getting validates that hypothesis. And again, this is stuff we never really had before. Not on a national scale were we able to say this. So we're able to develop this. We're able to potentially bring in data sets from organisations such as Strava, who have a huge amount of data around cycling. We can start to build really interesting analysis and understanding of active travel, which of course is something the government is really keen to promote. We can start to overlay data around e-scooter use as that starts to become popular. We are currently expanding our collection of data around car parking, because again, that's another really interesting metric. But we now have lots of different data sources we can look at, we can overlay, we can slice regionally, we can slice by city or nationally, to give us a really strong understanding of what's happening with transport. So the next slide, please. We can also use this data to look at specific events in specific parts of the country and maybe learn for the future, maybe learn for exiting the EU, maybe learn for how we can think about how we analyse data around ports going forward, and using this type of model to think about targeting other data sources. So this graph here is showing specific events. This is showing car use. This is showing car use in Bournemouth. And as you can see, around the public holidays, there's a massive spike in car use. We probably all saw the pictures on the news from the summer of people crowding onto the beaches of Bournemouth. This proves that happened. This shows what happened and when it happened. This helps us to think about this in the future. If you think about not Bournemouth but Dover in the weeks in January and February, once the transition period has ended, this type of data can be generated for that purpose, and again be very useful, very important, very useful. We can see that. So that was a really useful thing to be able to do. And again, because of the data structure that we have, because of the work that Arup did, we were able to produce this kind of analysis very quickly. And on a weekly basis, we're able to slice the data in different ways to see all types of interesting things. Next slide, please. So I seem to have managed to get to very nearly the end of the presentation without making a typo, but there is one on this one. The title is wrong. This title should say dashboard, not local and specific events. This is something we've been producing every week now. This is a dashboard showing travel trends across the country on a weekly basis on a very simple way. Now, again, this is great for national policymakers. I think this should be good for local policymakers, for regional government, for people in cities, because we can really show what's happening. We can show trend analysis. We can help cities who understand in fairly good detail what's happening in their own cities, but we can help them benchmark against other cities. We can help them answer questions that politicians like to ask about how we're performing against our neighbours, how we're performing against similar cities, how the measures that we're taking are impacting us as opposed to others. So we can start to do all that. This data set allows us to do all that, and the work that Arup do in the background, the work that they do around analysing this and graphing it, as you can see, gives us a huge opportunity to show this type of thing. It's incredibly powerful. So next slide, please. So that's a quick gallop through the local authority data. This list, which again you can't read, is there to show you the number of people that have helped us. That's the list of I think that's not quite exhaustive. I think there may be one or two missing from there. And if you can read that and see the odd names not there, and it should be, then I apologise. But you can see the breadth of people that have helped us with this. City councils, county councils, data providers, car park owners, national bodies who have data, a huge range of people. And we're now looking to expand that. We're looking to grow this. We're looking to bring more authorities on board. We're looking to get other people who have data, who have national data sets on board, because we think the things I've just shown you are very important. We think they're important nationally, but we think that can build into a data set that's very useful for cities and regions as well. And this is something that we want to continue, and long may that happen. And we are now looking through TTF about how we can fund its development, how we can fund its long-term future. But I think this is one of the things I think that's come out of the pandemonium of the last year is we've now got something that we never had before, which people widely in the DFT, widely in government, recognise as a really, really strong resource. So can I have my last slide, please? So as Steve said, and I'm sure as Steve will continue to say throughout the day, ttf.uk.net, that's the TTF website. Please go there. There's all kinds of useful stuff there. But what you will find on the link before is you will find the weekly digests. So every week we produce a digest of the graphs I've just shown you, which obviously we update from the last week's data. So it's very current. It's data that's no more than 5 or 6 days old. You can find it at that address there. And each Wednesday we put a new one up, and all the previous ones are there for you to look at. So a huge amount of data there. We can also produce bespoke and specific data. We can talk to people about that. That's something we can do if people have particular needs. We can help them with that. So there we go. That's the award-winning UK COVID data project in 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Darren, thank you for that. And again, we haven't got a huge amount of time for questions. I've got one that I want to put to you, but before that, there's quite a detailed one here, which you might be able to see in your Q&A, which is someone asking not just whether we could share the list of which authorities provided data, but whether the basis on which that data was collected could be shared as well. And the question asks whether it's by roadside sensor, by type, or MNO base station, GPS smartphone, or floating vehicle source. Is the level of granularity of how the data was collected available, or is it perhaps available to you but not available to the rest of us?
Good question. It is available. We do know that. We obviously, to one of the things I haven't said is that we built this data set with the DFT's statistics team looking over our shoulder. So it's been done very rigorously. So we understand the background of the data quite well. The rush up to now has been to get the data out there. And so we've been in this kind of sort of Churchillian war effort type phase. As we start to think about this going forward, I think that yes, we will be able to publish more about how we get this, where it comes from, what data we do, what analysis we apply. We know all that, and yes, I think that's a good point. We should maybe start to publish that in an anonymised way. Of course, we're not here to publicly shame or display anybody. So, but yes, I'm sure we can do that.
Well, there is another question come up here, which is about whether we can share the link to the traffic dashboard. I think I'm right in saying if you follow the link to the weekly report, that will include the traffic dashboard.
That's correct. The first graph or the first table in each weekly report is the dashboard. Yeah. Okay.
So the question I had before we move on to Andy is this. I was very struck that one of the advantages, one of the options that you mentioned as you rattled through there was the thought that an authority could compare itself with the authority next door or with a different authority in order to see how well or badly they're doing, or to see how differently they're doing. I rather prefer that to well or badly. But we don't, I think, we didn't ever see this as creating some kind of league table or winners and losers. So is it possible? Here I am in mid-Sussex. If I wanted to compare mid-Sussex with, I don't know, I'll pick some at random, York. Could I do that through the data that you're making available? And is that what we really want people to do?
This is something we need to explore, I think. And I think as we move away from the initial urgency around providing national data to help government make decisions and plan policy, we need to debate with the TTF community. We need to debate with the cities that provide data to understand what they want from this. And it may well be that, and it may well be something different. But I think yeah, we need to be very aware of the fact this isn't about naming and shaming. This isn't about showing good and bad. We need to be careful about that, but we need to understand what people could use this for. And I think that really is my challenge going forward to the community is we have this, government is committed to it. Let us know what you think it will be useful for.
Okay, and that's that ongoing conversation you described. That's a transport technology forum conversation rather than a DFT one, or do you see the lines blurred between the two?
I think the lines are blurred, but it is TTF, and I think DFT in its civil service very nervous way of thinking about publicity needs to be commended for letting the TTF get on with this and having quite a light hand of control over it. DFT in the background is really useful because obviously DFT pay the bills, but that gives us the national perspective, the national rigor around the data. But the fact that the TTF have been kind of allowed to go on and get on and do this, I think is really welcome, and I think that's how it will go forward as primarily a TTF undertaking.
Okay, I'm going to pose one more question, but actually for you to come back when we get to the panel session at the end, Darren, and that's from Douglas asking why the DFT COVID data dashboard tracker didn't include national connected vehicle data. So you can have a muse on why that came about. But in the meantime, we do need to press on. So I'm going to say a big thank you to Darren, actually a big thank you to everyone who was involved. Huge amount of work done in Arup and very successfully. So good stuff there.